I can provide those to you. So again, my name is Jackie Froemming. I'm part of the state leadership team in Minnesota. And probably you noticed already that, yes, I'm from Minnesota. Can you tell? I have the Minnesota accent. Yes. So the presentation guiding tool for measuring and reporting the public value of volunteer activities. And so as we were listening to the speaker this morning, I was like, yeah, that sounds familiar. So here's what happened. About 3 years ago, we started putting together an annual report. And you have, this is the latest report, so it's the one for last year, and you're passing around copies of those. So this one is not our infographic report with all the numbers. This one is the one about stories, how we're changing lives. So what we do is we ask the county programs to submit a county report that we get together, you know, we compile them, we read them. And as part of the process, we were calling all of the county programs, and during that phone conversation, we would say, hey, do you know already which project you're gonna highlight for the year? And some of the conversations, some of the comments that some of the coordinators were saying, especially one, she said, well, I'm between two projects. I don't know which one I'm going to report, because maybe I'm gonna go with this one because there were more volunteers, more master gardeners involved with that project. You see the problem with that? I started thinking after I hand up the phone, I was like, that's not really what's the point of this. It doesn't matter that there were 50 volunteers involved with this project versus this one that there was only 10 volunteers. Is what difference was made, how we changed life, what was different because of that project? What is the message? What is the story that we want to share with our stakeholders and funders? They don't care if a project had 20 volunteers versus 2. So that was the idea. We want to collect stories, great stories from county programs. So for those of you that have the actual report, if you open it, there's 5 stories. This is one of the pages, and it has 4 of the stories. And you know, the better stories are those that you're like, wow, you change lives. People are better quality of life. The environment is better because of that. So those were the stories that we were looking for. So something that we did, we put together a guiding tool, because you can tell volunteers, okay, tell me outputs, outcomes, and impacts. Does that sound familiar? But if you don't tell them how to get there, it's harder. So we put together this guiding toolkit, and we unveil, we share this file with the volunteers across the state, with the coordinators and local leaders last October. So this is actually the first year that they're going to be able to use this. So the toolkit, the tool has several parts. This first is kind of like the introduction page. It has listing the different components. And so it's like that. So here is the actual guiding tool. And it's probably hard for you to be able to see the screen. Again, if you want the actual file, just send me an email and I can email you the file. Some of you will be able to have that document. But we have definitions. Okay, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. Maybe for you that makes sense, you know what those are. But it's to keep reminding people, volunteers, coordinators, what they are. So we include definitions. We also included examples of the most common volunteer activities that volunteers do. And that is a 2-sided 1 page. So I included the activities of teaching a class. That's very common. Organizing, coordinating a learning garden tour. That's another one. So if you look at the tool, if they use that, it goes from the left to the right, and it was, as it was mentioned this morning, outputs is easy. That's usually numbers. Is the number of classes that were offered, the number of people that attended, the number of square footage of rain gardens that were planted. Those are easy. As we move from the left to the right, it gets more complicated, and maybe those are the numbers that county programs are not measuring and are reporting. So what we say is, okay, take it a step further, and in just, rather than just saying outputs, now try to measure, and the two things are behavior change, two things. And a lot of people say, you know, they're submitting their statements like, oh, people came to my class and they learned. We cannot, I mean, yes, we can share that with stakeholders, county commissioners, but it's better if you can say 84% of the people that attended the class learned considerable amount of new knowledge. I mean, measurable results, that's the key, measurable results. So what we did is, and I'll go back one page. If you notice on step one, it's probably hard to see, but you see those blue lines? On the third one over there, we actually put together and share templates for evaluation forms, because believe it or not, that is something that they're always asking help with. I don't have an evaluation form. How you ask the right questions? Because a lot of times they will say, and you probably can have heard this, they said, they will ask the audience, did you like the class? And people will say no, because the room was too hot, the chairs were too hard. That's the wrong question to ask. You need to know what to ask. So we're providing templates. There's two evaluation forms, one for adults, one for youth. So that's part of the tool. So if they use those evaluation forms, now they're going to be able to have numbers, percentages for the middle column of outcomes. And that's great, better than if they just have the outputs. Now, if they can take it a step further and talk about impacts, public value, that is how the entire community is benefiting from that class that you did or from that rain garden that was planted. So, and a lot of times for volunteers, coordinator, local leaders, when they're putting a report together, it's hard. Maybe they have the idea of what they want to say, but it's the language, how to say it. So again, we're giving them examples of, okay, if you taught a class, here's more or less the language that you can use for indicating the impacts that happened because of that class. So this is the front of the page, then that's the back of the page. And again, when I'm sharing these guiding tools with the coordinators, I say, these are not just all the volunteer activities that you do, because you do more than this. But again, I included the most common ones. And as part of assisting coordinators and local leaders to be able to measure and report, we say, if you have questions, contact the state leadership team. We can help you craft that message, use the right language, the language that county commissioners, county administrators will like to read. Then, as part of the tool, there's also a worksheet. Because for a lot of them, it's like, okay, now I know what outputs, outcomes, and impacts are, but I need to put the right narrative, the right language. So we give them an online form that they can work on it, enter the information, save it, come back the next day and say, well, I'm going to change that word for this one. And when they're draft is ready. They can share that with us, and we can say, yeah, it looks good, but maybe make a change here or there. So it's a file that we can share, but it's for them to put it together initially. The worksheet is optional. If they feel that they don't need to use the worksheet, it's fine, but it's just an additional tool for them to use if they want to use it. The back of the worksheet has a space for making note of comments from participants, because that's the other part of great stories. Great stories, you can need numbers, again, because they are measurable results, but those great quotes from people that attended your class, or a kid that was part of the summer camp growing vegetables, if you can capture that great quote and share those with your stakeholders, is great. On the first page, the one with the actual tool, there's example of great quotes. For example, in Brainerd, that's Brainerd, Minnesota, there's a gardening 101 summer camp with kids growing vegetables. And as part of the networking between the volunteers, the kid, and the parents, one of the parents was saying something like, oh, my kid came home and he was talking about kohlrabi. Did I say that right? Kohlrabi? Okay, you know what it is, the weird looking vegetable. And the mom was like, I have never heard of that vegetable. But here is how it's making a difference. The kid is learning something, is going back home, is talking to the parents, and now the parents are knowing about the weird looking vegetable. But if you capture that quote, that is huge. Because again, along with numbers, human stories, how you're changing lives, that's great. Also photos. And I don't know if you have issues with getting good photos, but we are saying, okay, good photos. First, the volunteer has to be wearing a name badge. If there's a whole bunch of people and you don't know who the public is and the volunteer is, you're missing part of the picture. Not pun intended, but you know. So that is one. Also, action. If you were planting a rain garden or something, and all of a sudden you have all the volunteers standing there, and there's a picture of just the volunteers standing there. Well, it's okay, but it would have been better, it would have been an action photo where you're actually planting. Or if you are teaching kids, if you're actually, you know, right next to a kid and you're showing them how to plant. So we are encouraging county programs to submit great photos. And if you happen to have the annual report close to you, yours, look at that photo. That photo is great. And you know how you know when a photo is great? If you know what's going on in that photo without a caption. You don't need a caption to tell that, hey, there's a volunteer there. She's teaching them how to grow vegetables, because you can tell that it's a vegetable garden. So that is a great photo. And it's getting better and better. More and more county programs are submitting those kind of photos, so that's great. The last part of the tool, the guiding tool, is how to craft and how to put together a report about that particular activity. It could have been teaching a class, it could have been about a summer camp program with kids about growing vegetables, any activity. But here's the message. A lot of county programs were putting a multi-page report to their stakeholders, you know, for the county commissioners, county administrator, and sadly, we know, and I heard from county commissioners saying, if it is too long, the report, I'm not gonna read it. So you have to make it short and sweet for your stakeholders to grab it and read it. So our suggestion to county programs is put a one-page, it can be front and back, one-page report. And the layout, very easy to follow. You divide that or arrange the report based on outcomes, outputs, and impacts. easy to follow. Any county commissioner, any county administrator will be able to do this. Then you include great photos, action photos of people that, the photo, you can tell that there's a Master Guardian volunteer there. And you also include quotes, those quotes that are great. On report, in 101 in Minnesota, I will have to tell you the first portion, the output is real. The outcomes and the impacts are fake. I had to make them up because they didn't have the data. They never did evaluation. So using their project as an example, I put this together, I went back to them and say, okay, this is what your project report could look like if you start doing X, Y, and Z. So that was last year. So this year, they started the same summer program in May, and I reminded them, okay, after your 13-week summer camp, you should be able to have this information, these numbers. So back, started in May, now know what. So we shared this tool with volunteers last October. And the tool that you have, it was reviewed by the evaluation specialist at the university. It was reviewed by all the faculty. It was reviewed by the coordinators. So the draft went, I mean, over many versions. So you have review coordinators tool. I'm going to the first one value is a change and shift. I just don't want to say that word. Say it. Thank you. Shift, and will take some energy and likely will meet some resistance. Why? We don't want to do evaluation. I used to be the local would say, I don't want to evaluate my classes because I don't want to hear that I'm doing a bad job. But I would say, but how can you improve if you don't know what could be changed? So introducing this tool, it will take a while when everyone is on board, but it's at least we're making this accessible to everyone. And along with making it accessible is emphasizing why this. Another comment, thanks for reminding us of these tools are helpful for planning and evaluation. We just have to remember to use them. Yeah. And in fact, that's why we shared the tool last October. And for these stories, we collect them. We ask them to submit these stories November 16 or mid-November. So that's why I don't think there was enough time last year for coordinators to take advantage of the tool, because we shared the tool in October. And already in November, mid-November, they had to share the stories. But this year in January, we did a webinar that we went over the tool, explained how to use it. So that was a activity took place. And next week, we have another webinar scheduled to again go over the guiding tool. Because then we're in August. Great story. So they will have enough time to say, okay, these are the numbers I need. But like I said, it will be a few years before everyone is like, know the numbers to collect. I know that I had to collect quotes. I know that I had to take the photos. Yes, the templates for the evaluation form, that's great. And we're actually going to share them with the volunteers. So the resources are there. Maybe county programs were already doing this. If not, we are just trying to make it easier for county programs to be able to say, okay, this is a great project, this is a great story, because And here are the measurable results. Again, I apologize for not having hard copies of two resources, but if you want a link to the files, just send an email to mgweb, and I will email you the link to the two files. Thank you.
And then we're going to do a small change in order. So Holly, you can come up.